Thank you and welcome back, everybody. It's always wonderful to see you here. And another live lesson around integration brought to you by Cleo and the Think Tank. I'm Frank Kenney, and last time we talked about application integration and we talked about all the fun parts of application integration. So we talked about talking from application A to application B and making the connection and what that meant and all the different patterns that emerged there. Today, we're going to talk about something that's a little closer, near and dear to my heart. What happens when we have to make these connections between applications or between companies and they're behind firewalls? And so there becomes negotiation and there becomes different types of tactics and different types of patterns. And there's a particular piece of this whole scenario of B2B or ecosystem integration that is particularly fascinating and has always been fascinating. And that's going to be the topic of this think tank. And it is the story around onboarding, right? And so, onboarding. And so, what do we mean by onboarding? So, when we talk about onboarding, we talk about you and your company are sitting in a conference room and you've got a manufacturer and you guys shake hands and, yep, we're going to do business. We're going to sell your products and we're going to sell them for this much and all of the details. And the lawyers come in and they come in with the red lines. And finally, they've got an agreement. Everybody shakes hands. And when the manufacturer leaves the room, your team rubbing their hands together saying, this is going to be great. We're going to make a lot of money with this, but we've got to bring them on board. In other words, we've got to take our systems, right? Our systems, and we've got to connect it to their systems. And we've got to navigate all of this stuff that's back here, and we're going to have to bring it in. And, where do we start? Well, that's when we start to talk about onboarding. Onboarding is a set of complex processes, right? And those complex processes can be broken down into 6 very specific domains. And so let's walk through these domains, these milestones, these things that you absolutely want to make sure that you get right, and you want to make sure that you do them in order to have the best onboarding experience for you and your partners, right? So let's start with the first piece, right? So this is box number 1, right? And we're going to call this the campaign. And the campaign is really where you start to make your announcements to your partners, where you're screaming from the tops of every roof, hey, I'm now doing business with this provider or this partner, and we're going to start this process in which we're going to get the information from you. We're going to store that information. We're going to test with that information. We're going to make sure that everything is working, right? And then we're going to start to do really good business. In some cases where you already have those relationships, this is something that they know about. But in many cases where someone has never done electronic ecosystem integration or electronic B2B. So this is very, very new. So you really want to let them know what's going on. You want them to have full visibility into how long this should take, what to expect, who are the resources that are going to be necessary on every side. You are saying that you are starting the process, right? That's the first big step. And there are tools that companies have that help you with this. It could be anything from an email or an introduction video, or it could be snail mail or something that comes in a nice FedEx box with some flowers or some candy to say, hey, this is going to be really an interesting process, an interesting activity, but we're going to be better for it. Either way, you really want to get the buy-in from your business partners before you start any type of onboarding procedure. Okay, so the second big piece that we're going to get into, right? The second big piece we're going to get into is we're going to get into the questionnaire, right? And the questionnaire, very sometimes like a survey, but it's really going to ask questions such as, what type of comms are you using? What type of security mechanisms do we need to have in place, right? If I'm using APIs and other types of programmatic interfaces, what are the methods and how do I get access to the APIs and some of those things? What are the syntaxes that I'm going to be using? And then more importantly, and this is something that a lot of folks overlook, when I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm agreeing on doing something for someone, I'm usually going to say, and these are the expectations you should have from me. These are the service levels you should expect. This is the resolution that you should expect. This is how we are going to deal with exceptions. So ever so critical service level agreements, right? And you're going to find that in an onboarding process, SLAs and services and the people who deal with them come up over and over and over again. Things happen, mistakes happen. I will be the first person to say I've had more than my fair share of accidentally kicking the plug out of a server. So connectivity drops and sometimes certificate expires. But when we have service levels that represent the expectations, we know what to do. We know the time frames that we need to do. It in. The third piece of my the third piece, and I'm going to just back up with that because I want to make sure that I keep this consistent colors. The third piece of this is going to be around the actual creation of profile, right? And so the profile is actually an asset, right? It's an asset that is just as important as an API, or it's as important as a map, or it's as important as a COM or a COM profile. All of these things go together. So this representation of this all get put into an asset that is centrally available and that can be used at any given point in time to read us out how exactly we are connecting with the partner, what are they expecting, what are the syntaxes, right? And so this is the profile. And different companies, different providers, different technology service providers, as well as technology software, have different ways of capturing these profiles. There really isn't a well recognized standard way of doing things. There's some stuff that was out there, but everyone kind of does it a little bit different. And by the way, when you start to talk about modernizing your EDI environments, this is where it gets a little sticky because all of these things tend to be located in different places. The comms are over in this system, the security is over in this system, the SLAs, the op guys have those, the developers have all the API stuff, and the syntaxes belong to the EDI guys. So all of these things start to end up in the same places or references to where they need to be, where they can be easily found, right? So the fourth box, right? Our fourth box, or our fourth critical domain here, and I see here that I'm going to run out of room, but I got plenty of iPad room here, is going to be provisioning, right? And so this is when I take all of the stuff that I learned in these areas and I start applying them into my infrastructure, right? And that may mean I need to provision some VMs, right? In some cases, the provisioning is something I throw over the wall to my managed service, right? They take care of all of that. But in some cases where companies are doing it themselves, where they have private cloud deployments, you have to figure out what are my infrastructure needs, right? What are my security needs, and how do I get those guys ready, and how do I get those guys opening up ports, and how do I get those guys generating keys and digital certificates and all of those types of things, right? But it's also going back to, and again, I'm going to just highlight this, going back to the ops guys and understanding how they are going to create notifications, measurements, dashboards, and all of those key things that are going to be necessary when it comes to actually doing business with someone. So we've got these four key steps. I did say there were six, so we're going to talk about two more, but we've got, just to review, we've got our campaign activities, our questionnaire activities, the creation of profiles, the provisioning of those profiles, that information, right? And so we're going to go to our next page here, and we're going to start to look at, so what are our fifth and sixth boxes? And I really wanted to make these big. I want to make these two boxes big because I think that they're critically important for us to remember. So box 5 is going to be testing, right? We need to test these things. And testing can be the most difficult or challenging part of the onboarding process because it requires two parts. It requires sending something across the wire and then getting a notification, an email, or someone picks up the phone and says, "Yeah, I got it," and it works. And I pushed it into my back system, and we've generated a test purchase order. Or, no, I didn't get it. Or, you know what, our mapping is off, we need to fix that. So it's something that both parties do. And sometimes it's very difficult to get your partners to work on your same time frame. That's why we go back to the partner campaign and the partner questionnaire, why those things are absolutely critical, because we want to make sure that we have people bought in. So the testing of the comms, right? The testing of the maps, the testing of the integrations, right? Because remember, we want to make sure that we're having the outcomes that we need. But the testing of exceptions, right? The testing of handling error resolution and how do we handle error resolution and some of those things. So it's the ops, it's the managing the expectations of your partners. That's incredibly critical. And then finally, we've got everything done, we deploy it, right? And that's simple. So now we take just a clone of of our testing environment and we put it into production. And then I'm done. And then I'm incredibly happy. I've done everything I needed to do. I'm now doing business and I'm making money, and all is well. I did what I promised to do. And companies, right? Companies such as Cleo are actually judged and rated on how fast we can help a customer with this onboarding process and doing it correctly. And we believe that you should be looking at your provider, your technology provider, your software solutions. You should be looking at those folks and digging into what does it mean to onboard. But this doesn't mean I'm done. So now I've had my partner and it's been a year and it's gone great, and their certificates expire every year. So all of a sudden I'm sending out a new purchase order, or they say that they're sending me a purchase order and it's not working. And the reason it's not working is because the certificate is expired. Well, on one hand, I can just go into my production environment and upload a certificate and have it done. And most of the time that's going to work. But sometimes if it's a little bit more complex, like maybe it's not just a certificate. Maybe I've implemented a new part of my ERP, and so there's a field that I absolutely need filled out. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to recreate an EDI map. It means that maybe you have to tweak an element. But what that means is that I've got to go back, and I've got to go back and I've got to understand, what does that do to my profile? What does that do to my system? What does that mean when it comes to provisioning? And finally, what does that mean when it comes to test and deploy? So the initial onboarding is steps 1 through 6, steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But when it comes to the continual action, because things change because they have to, things expire. Some of the biggest retailers out there expire certs every 24 months, which means that if you think about the amount of partners that they have, it's a continual process of onboarding. So it's continually going through steps 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and doing that with existing customers, all while you've got new customers that you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's why we say that onboarding is a set of complex processes. Now, I'm going to have the publisher of the blog and my colleagues here at Cleo, I'm going to have them include some information about how we look at onboarding, as well as a little bit more prettier pictures of what I've just drawn out. As always, leave a comment with us, and you're more than happy to reach out to us if you have any questions, and we can spend some time digging deeper into this. But for now, we'll see you next time. I'm Frank Kenney, and thanks for taking a part in the Think Tank blog.